Hi, everyone. Welcome to Two Bald Guys Talking Safety. I'm Langdon Dement,
And I'm Julian Taylor.
and welcome to our podcast.
So, hello and welcome to episode 3 of Two Bald Guys Talking Safety. I'm joined again by my good friend in Nashville, Tennessee, Mr. Langdon Dement. How are you, Langdon?
I'm great. How are you, Jules?
I'm good. We've got a first here where I'm actually doing the podcast from home. So, the British guy is finally doing the podcast from the United Kingdom. And today is an interesting subject, Langdon. We're going to be talking about the difference between training and learning. So training versus learning, and really starting to think about why that is so important in terms of engaging people and how that can start to affect culture. And I wanted to start with a story if I can, and it's a story about me and my ineptitude with Excel. Um, I've been on, I think, probably three or four day-long Excel training courses with great trainers where we've looked at some really good things that you can do in Excel, all the usual things that people like to do. Um, the issue I have is that I don't use Excel very often. And what commonly happens then is I come to use Excel and I know I want to do something and I know it's possible in Excel because I've been trained to do it, but actually I can't remember quite how to do it. So I end up wasting an amazing amount of time trying to do the thing that I want to do. And I think it's a really sort of good example of sort of traditional training that we lots of businesses do in lots of disciplines, but actually it's not that effective, is it? So today we want to start to think about how we could change that in the world of health and safety and make training something that's more engaging, but more importantly, when we think about safety, it actually has a positive effect and changes the way that people do things. Langdon, I know you've got some thoughts as well on
Yeah,
this one.
no, I think that's good. And, I was actually thinking about something. So, in my undergrad, my major was biology. And so, we had all the organic chemistries, all the microbiology, went through all that. One of the most difficult classes I had was biostatistics, and everything framed around was utilizing Excel. And you're right, it was one of probably the most difficult classes, and it was because of them. And this was 15 years ago, but still, an entire semester devoted to it, and it was 100% Excel, and I am terrible at Excel. And it does kind of go to show. Now, did I learn a lot in that class? Yes. Did I learn about using Excel? No. And and that's it is a good. This is a topic we love. I know Jules and I both have quite a good history, very in depth in regards to working with this and just how that incorporates within health and safety as a whole. But it is a very interesting topic when you think about what is training, what does good training actually look like, how does learning embedded into that. So yeah, I'm looking forward to the next few minutes of hopeful, hopefully good banter of knowledgeable topics.
And 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 it's interesting, Langdon, because my background, I was a training manager for a large business, and I kind of look back now and think we were quite misguided in a lot of the things that we did. We thought we were doing a great job, but we would bring people away from the workspace for maybe 2 or 3 days at a time, sit them in a classroom, and we'd go through lots of things and give them lots of information. And again, it's that classic thing now as we've moved on in terms of what we can do and the way we can deliver training in terms of how much of that stuff did they actually retain, and it's probably not a great deal. So it's how can we change our approach? And I suppose the next step was then e-learning was going to be the big thing, wasn't it? And it was the big buzzword for a while, was to move to e-learning. But we're still taking people away from the workplace, maybe for a shorter period of time. It might be 30 minutes, it might be an hour. But again, the thing that's missing is that then taking that information and putting it into use immediately, isn't it?
Yep. Well, and that's, I think so. That was when I came out and I first started working with the organization I did. Uh, I guess that was 12 years ago now. And in regards, I was a health and safety consultant there, and we were, managed internal health and safety. We did a lot of external training, external health and safety consulting, of course. And I remember there were so many people that were vested in learning, and you had the learning theory, and they were the excuse me, the experts in that realm, and incorporating just to what you said. How can we get good training for everyone across the board? And the whole e-learning was, I mean, that was like the magical new thing
Yeah,
that
yeah,
was kind of
yeah.
like a cure-all answer. And it was funny because I came from very much, my mom was a teacher for 32 years before she retired, and teachers like all in the family, it seems like it within in Tennessee. So learning should be more, training should be more personable. We should be there to actually be able to hear it. So I was always a more of a blended type approach anyways. But it's still, how could so many people, when we have to figure out how to get everyone not just engaged but actually understanding what does their job entail, what's around them, how can we make that easier? And I don't really know that there is a cure all for that, but there's a lot of things, I think, to your point, that we've tried to do to make easier. And honestly, I don't know that it's been done historically easier, or maybe even better necessarily. I think
I
that's a very good point.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, for me, I love thinking about all of this stuff, and it's trying to step back and think about how can we do things more effectively, and what works, what doesn't work. And if you think about your own life experiences, I think back to learning to drive a car, and there's this sort of process that you go through of, first of all, I've never driven a car in my life. So I'm unconsciously or consciously incompetent. I know there's something there that I want to do, but I'm not capable of doing it. Now, as you start to learn to drive, do you remember those awkward moments? I mean, in America, there's not a lot of stick shifts, are there? But if you learn to
Oh,
drive
it
with
used to
a,
be.
yeah, yeah. So but if you learn to drive with a manual gearbox or a stick shift, as you would call it, um, you consciously think about everything that you're doing, don't you? So you consciously think about moving the gear lever through the gearbox, the steering, the using of indicators, and that's conscious competency where you're starting to be conscious about the thing that you're doing, and starting to become competent in it. But
Yep.
actually, what happens over time is that the more that you do it, you become unconsciously competent. So actually, you do it without thinking about it, don't you? So you
Hmm.
think about when you drive now, you drive a car, you don't consciously think about changing gear, the steering inputs, and so on. And that's where we want to get to with health and safety in the workplace, isn't it? Where people just do the right thing. Um, and I suppose the thing that's really exciting in terms of training and the change in training that's happening at the moment is this training at the coalface, if you like. So micro small learnings that people can do at the point of work when it's completely relevant. So it means that we take away this gap, if you like, from between the training and the activity. So actually, the sort of unconscious competency comes from somebody then doing something on a daily basis, but they know they're doing it in the right way.
Yeah, and it's I think the more I think about it, um, there's a lot of variance also that occurs, because you have to take it that we're so there's of course different levels of training, from our awareness training that you everybody needs to have, to your compliance training that, because of regulatory issues, there's some stuff that has to be trained upon, everyone must be aware of. And then even kind of, I would say, further past that, maybe your best practice. And really, all three are important and crucial. But what we're wanting and what we're asking everyone to do is to almost be I won't say an expert, and that's a stretch, but we're asking everyone to be super knowledgeable in a lot of different areas. And when you think about that, it's tough.
Yeah.
There's only a few of us that actually have that expertise. No, I'm kidding. And that in general, that's pretty that's strong. I think about it. I put it back in. We talk about golf all the time, and we play golf as often as we can. And I've played as long as I can remember. And you talk about even the pros, it's fine-tuned things, and it's the same principle here, that no matter how much we do that same repetition, sometimes failures happen, sometimes little gaps in awareness or gaps in even maybe what knowledge was presented in the training. So then we realized that there were little bitty systematic failures that existed throughout that could have led to something. So it is also understanding how can we provide the best training, and what does that actually mean for everyone going forward. And it is because of that, I think, factor, that everyone learns differently. Everyone um, everyone understands things a little differently. So how can we really bridge that gap better than we have historically, when we do have such a wide gamut that everyone has to be have at least have an understanding of. And that's, we're making some gentle, honestly, assumptions here of thinking kind of just the baseline, but there's some high hazard environments, some industries that are very sophisticated in processes. Maybe it's lab work, whatever it is. And you're talking very minute potential hazards or trainings that they have to have from even regulatory, organizational best practice. So then it starts getting, how do we actually make that training, how do we make that look better, so it does check boxes. And I say check boxes not as just not as the quick thought, but check boxes as ensuring everyone is getting what they need to get. And that's when I
Uh,
think it becomes complicated, honestly.
and I think you make a really important point there, Langdon, which is we can be so aspirational that we've become a bit aloof about that sort of tick box, the compliance piece, which is still important. We need to do that. But I think when we think about our maturity curve, our health and safety maturity curve, where we want to be trying to help people to move from that sort of compliance stage through proactive towards excellence, that actually it's those almost, if you think about it, it's those tweaks that you talked about with your golf game. Those are the things that we want to keep doing on a daily basis, and that's where microlearning can become a really useful tool. And I was just thinking about this the other night, that things like toolbox talks, or tailgate talks, that as they're sometimes called, that's a tweak to me. So that's a tweak that we're going to do at the start of a shift, maybe, to encourage people just to refresh and remember the way to do something safely.
Mhm.
And thousands of times I've been asked, can we get a signature to show that somebody's attended a toolbox talk? And I kind of almost challenge back with, what value does a signature give? It doesn't prove anything, does it? It proves that they were there in body, but nothing else. Um, and I think that's where it gets exciting with things like microlearning, because what we can do is our toolbox talk can be can be consumed easily at the point of work using a mobile device. But the really good bit then is that we can put some kind of quiz or some kind of check in there to say, actually, have they understood the toolbox talk, and has it sunk in? And that starts to move the game on, doesn't it?
And it is that challenge, oh, for sure, 100%. And it's that challenge of, so most of the time people are doing so much because they're covering bases from a regulatory perspective. And I get it. That you need to do that. Please
Yeah.
don't take anything we're saying as, they said we don't need to document. Yes, document who's had their training. Just if OSHA or other regulatory body ever comes, they look at that. So just bear that in mind. And that is important to ensure that everyone, and that's your way also of just understanding who has gone through what. But when we think of, there's certain requirements that you have to sit through, hours of training, or it might be a couple of days. And for a lot of people, if we're removing them from, so I mean, there's a number of factors under that. I mean, you could almost use the iceberg example. that if you remove somebody from the workplace for a couple of days, what can that actually do? And from a productivity, from a even potentially a quality for putting somebody else in that job while the other person's going to training. And then we're anticipating them on becoming not an expert necessarily, but to a certain extent an expert to understand all the hazards or what is around them. And then so that's your training, so we're giving that. How can we ensure that training is actually it's good and it has learning embedded in it? And that's, from my perspective, that's one of the most important things, is to always remember. So I'm a big proponent of a good learning culture, and
Yep.
that's
Yep.
because all avenues of an organization can honestly be framed around learning, meaning they're wanting to learn to be better, to get better, whether it's productivity, whether it's quality, whether it's health and safety. Really, it's all of it. So if we can embed learning in that, meaning people are getting that awareness, they're getting that better understanding of, maybe there's a new hazard that's been presented, maybe there was a better way to do the job, maybe there's a job hazard analysis, their JHA is actually somehow embedded in that little micro learning, or that quick training as a refresher. The more that that's in there, honestly, the better that that's going to be, because we're making it real. There was one, I don't know what they would technically call it, one training piece when virtual reality a few years ago, when it was kind of on the verge of, is it going to take off? Is it not? To me, that made more sense than e-learning, than anything. And it was because, and I went through one, and it was because you're talking about, you could create a scenario, put it on, go through that entire scenario, and it was their job. You could make their job specifically, and they're
Yep.
doing it. Now,
Yep.
I understand a lot of people get sick, a lot of people can't handle that. So there's some speed bumps to the virtual reality, but it's that principle, kind of what you said earlier, of it is one of the closest things to being in the job without being in the job, taking away from the job, and also experiencing all the hazards that can be in that job. And that's, to me, that's one of the most important things when we think about learning. It's establishing better cadence of understanding more knowledge and being able to gain that and process that within their jobs. So it's an interesting topic of, how can we make sure that we're getting all the training we have,
Yep.
and that learning is really embedded
Yep.
in all of that, so it's
Yep.
not just that checkbox. Oh, Jules did this. Oh,
Yeah.
Langdon's had his.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and I think that's it. Training v learning. Learning is actually that being able to demonstrate that the knowledge has been taken on board and it's being put into practice. So, and I love what you say there about the virtual reality, because it does make it really relevant and really real world. I am one of those people who will vomit though if you put me into one of those headsets, so it's not a good solution for me.
We should
You made
try
me think, yeah, we should try it.
we should try
You made me think of another couple of things there though, Langdon, which is first of all, I think another pitfall of kind of the compliance approach, if you like, is the danger is we tick that box and then we don't retrain until we absolutely have to. So if there's
hmm
maybe a legal requirement, we come back to it in 2-3 years time. So actually there's these big sort of gaps between training. So I think we should make training just more of a regular thing that is done on a regular basis. And that way what we start to do is we start to create this culture where learning is just a part of what we do, but again, it's related to the real world. And that point of work piece is so important in terms of that it's immediate. And then the other thing that I think is particularly important in terms of this whole piece. So it's sort of impart the knowledge, people go and put it into practice. But then I think another area that health and safety teams and managers can really be thinking about is how do we bring coaching into the workplace to really then underpin and support the learning that's been happening. So that presence on sort of at the point of work of safety professionals, so we can actually just discuss with people, why do you do things that way? Are there ways that we could do it more effectively? Because again, that point of work conversation and that point of work coaching is probably the most important sort of piece in the jigsaw in terms of making sure that we're doing things the way we said we would do.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly. And you know what just came to my mind, and this is perfect. A good training v learning slash and learning embedded. And it is that real world because it's people coaching one another, working together. Because who are the experts in any environment? It's the one doing the job. That's where the
Yeah,
real,
yeah,
honestly, that's where real health and safety is.
yeah.
But if we can make it, if the more that we can embed it, the more we can coach and help one another. So about a month or two ago, Jules and I were walking around a session or a conference, is what I should say, a show, the show floor, and I got Jules to do a little learning himself on how to use a fire extinguisher, and he failed the first time, but through some
Mi- mi-
coaching from the
Miserably,
other,
I have to
yeah,
say.
well, yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
the
yeah,
building would have gone up, but it was one of those virtual reality, well, not virtual reality, one of those. I don't even know what you technically call it. If any of you have seen it at the safety shows, I'm sure many of you have. It's basically a screen, and you use a real fire extinguisher, and you try to put out a fire, and it's very sensitive to. I mean, it's all laser and like gamification, if you will. And but it's very reflective of, are you hitting the right points? Are you starting at the bottom? Are you getting it all off? Are you sweeping back and forth everything? So you go through the process. You flip the alarm, then you go through that. And he was talking to Jules as he was doing it, and again, unfortunately, the building went up for Jules, but quickly the second time you got it, and that is a perfect. Honestly, that just came to me, but that's a perfect scenario of why does something like that work so well. And it is because it's real, it's right there, it's a mock scenario, if you will. And through some quick discussions, you can fine tune things to actually learn, what did I do wrong, what could I do better, while you're going through your training of utilizing a fire extinguisher. So I think that's very that's what's real. That's what is impactful when it comes to health and safety, because it's not all glitz and glamour. It's not all the
it's
most
not.
sophisticated stuff in the world. Health and safety, it's what are some basic things that we can ensure and help everyone around an organization get better at. And that's one example. I mean, there's a plethora that we could utilize or talk about, but that's one piece that, if we can at least get in there and get more real, honestly, if you will, I think that's when we'll start checking boxes and hopefully seeing better attention to employees, so better attention to environments, which hopefully will show a better reflection of continual reduction of incidents, reduction of serious injuries, fatalities, yada yada. The list goes on. Maybe it's property damage, whatever it is. How many are because of just, I don't know what the word would be. I was going to say brain fart, but whatever your brain, you're just whatever it's called. How many times are incidents occur because of that? I mean, I've had numerous close calls
Yeah,
just because I don't want to put on my safety glasses. I just need to cut this one piece of wood, and spec hits you on the side of the face, and you just kind of, that was close.
yeah.
And it is that just basic. How can we instill that in everyone? And that's, to me, that's one of the most crucial parts of learning and training together. It's just instilling that knowledge.
I think there's one sort of final point as well, Langdon. I think it's just kind of been going through my head as we've been talking is we've talked a lot about sort of attention and attention spans is a really interesting thing
Hmm.
that is really relevant, I think, these days. And I can go back to my first point about Excel here, because you think about attention spans, and it's recognised, isn't it, that the human attention span is shrinking. I mean, and there's some crazy numbers out there. We'd have to check the sort of research on it. There's some crazy numbers that sort of the average attention span is into seconds now, so sort of single digit seconds. In fact, somebody suggested a goldfish might have a better attention span than some people these days, but I'm not going to confirm or deny that one, but it's a fact, isn't it? And part of that is because of the world we live in, where we're
Mhm.
kind of bombarded with all of these different solutions and systems and social media, and it's all vying for our attention, and kind of that's the way the brain is starting to get wired. Um, so actually, short and punchy training is more easily consumable and taken on board than these longer traditional training sessions. So the link back to my Excel piece was our colleague Marissa very kindly told me about actually a whole bunch of TikTok videos that we can get around Excel, but they're short, they're punchy, and they're easy and they're consumable. So you can go and find the one thing that you want to know about, and you can get a quick and easy solution. And again, I think that's a principle we should be applying into the world of health and
Mhm.
safety. So,
Yeah, because I thought TikTok was just for dancing and stuff. To be honest with you, your
well,
quick little.
I have my claim to fame is I've only ever done one TikTok video, which was where I had but I've got two daughters, and they encouraged me to do this with them, where they each had a bowl of water in front of them, and the principle was the question would come up on the phone, and I had to say which daughter was best at what. So it would come up who's the best driver, and I would dunk the head of the best driver into the bowl of water. But I do have to say I did bottle most of them and just dunk both of them each time, because then that way they couldn't shout at me.
That's fair.
So
Yeah, that's good.
anyway, dragging it back to sort of summarizing sort of around health and safety. I think some we could talk about this one all day. I know we could, because we often have, but some really key points here is that blended approach, isn't it? We know we need to do the compliance training, but how can we, to take the golfing analogy, bring in those sort of more regular daily tweaks, where we just refresh people, we remind people and prompt
Yeah.
people about the things that we want to do, but also make it real world. So make that training relevant to the things that people are actually doing in the real world, um, and make it easy for them to consume, and also evidence back that they've taken on board what it is that we've been talking about.
Yeah, and something you just said, thinking about that with the whole quicker learning, I remember, what was it? Probably 10, 15 years ago or 15 years ago, when I was in college, and during those days, they all said there was some study like 50 out of a 45, 50-minute class, people would get the first 5 to 10 minutes in the very end, and everything in the middle was kind of grainy. So you think about that now, and you're right. It probably is a minute, whatever. But you still have then that, which we've done some discussions on, and this is a whole nother, we won't go fully down that road, but you have that whole, how can I ensure that what I'm providing is going to help the worker who works differently, who maybe is a little older, so they think differently, to then the younger who thinks differently and might want it quicker. So, and that's where good learning, good training, they are embedded. And it is from that principle of trying to meet all of them. A few years ago, they were going through the whole, to ensure that everyone truly understood, if when during the e-learning you might have 2 slides, 3 slides, and then you had some type of learning activity, something to make it real. So, as we think about it going forward, it's definitely, I think when it comes to that perspective, it's how can we ensure that whatever we do, health and safety training, any just general awareness, people understand, make it fun, make it, make it real. Honestly,
Yeah,
put some
yeah,
type of quick learning activity, some little knowledge check, even if the all the answers are irrelevant and dumb, and there's only one that's directing them. It's taking them from just reading or just seeing or being read to, and actually I have to use a little bit of common sense to determine which is the correct answer, or what am I looking for here. So I think that's super relevant when we're talking about pulling someone off their job, anyways, when they're not getting paid to take a training. That's a lot of
yeah,
the perspectives.
yeah,
I've heard that numerous times. So make it fun. Look, you don't have to do your job for the next 5 minutes. Let's have some fun with this course, and hopefully you'll get something out of it that may be changed. So yeah, I totally agree. This is something we could banter on for hours.
yeah. Yeah. So I think it's about that flexibility of approach, isn't it? I mean, health and safety, there are going to be some bits that are they're not that exciting. We know that, but I think
Yeah.
what can we think about to make it more fun to do? And I think that gamification piece is a really good one, where actually across all of health and safety, whether it's learning, whether it's the reporting of things, where actually we can start to bring a bit of a competitive element into it between individuals and teams is a really good point. So I think
Hmm.
at that point we probably need to be drawing to a close. Great conversation,
Yeah.
as always. I think there's plenty we can be thinking about. How do we move from sort of our compliance state to excellence? And it's by not just ticking the boxes. We tick the boxes, but actually, how can we bring in those sort of more daily, more regular, short, punchy learnings to make training just a part of what we do? And at
Yeah.
that point, I think, Langdon, I need to hand back to you to give your usual sign off to the podcast.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you all joining and listening in today. And as you're going out about your daily business, just want everyone to stay safe and watch your back out there. Thank you.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed this podcast, we look forward to talking to you again soon. Please follow and subscribe on Spotify, Apple. You can also check us out at evotix.com.
And if you want to really check out how follically challenged we are, you can follow us on YouTube. Okay, so you can like and subscribe on YouTube. That would be great. Been great to talk today. Thanks for listening. Stay safe out there.
And watch each other's back.